Tales of Vilgilus. Amidst the flames. Storval, Sub-Quadrant 3. Thermal Refinery, Built Hotel Tax 887K. 0347 hours.
Overseer Second Class Cullum Drebs had had enough. He stomped along the metal corridor with a face like thunder. His heavy work boots clanged on the mesh decking, while the auspex in his hand emitted reedy warbles and pings. The bulky handset was made for miners and pipe menials, and Drebs had run a cable from the X-Load port directly to his audio augmetics in order to hear its output over the omnipresent rumbling of the volcano. He needed to be able to make out what his trusty device was telling him, even if the effort was making his head pound. It was the only way he would catch the miscreants in the act. The corridor Drebs stomped down was part of Transfer Zone Deltax Omnius 14, a tangle of macro-piping, corridors and thermal exchanger shrines driven deep into the volcano's flank. The strobing yellow lumen that illuminated it indicated that this zone was currently undergoing a high burn cycle. It was off-limits to all but the Magi geothermists who tended to the fiery heart of the magmatic extractors. "As if you couldn't tell from on the Omnisire dratted stain," Drebs muttered sourly, looking accusatory at the alarm in lumen. He had pulled rubberized robes over his overseer's armor and dragged the thick goggle-lensed cowl over his head to ward off the scalding jets that burst from all sorts of pressure valves along the corridor. Being buffeted and blinded by jets of superheated vapor was not a pleasant experience. Some of the tech priests would have considered it a holy blessing, he supposed, to be bathed in the mingled breath of the divine machine and blessed Pyre Mountain. It had left Drebs mildly scalded and angrier than ever, however. Doing his best to blink away the sweat that blurred his vision, the overseer paused to blink at his auspex screen. "Whoever you are, I've got you now," he snarled triumphantly. Thrice in the past work cycle, Drebs had detected unauthorized signifer contacts moving through this zone during high burns. To his immense frustration, they had always slipped away before he could catch up to them. This time, though, they didn't look to be moving. There were more of them, too, maybe 12 or so, though the blessed electromagnetic utterances of the thermal reactors made it difficult to get an accurate reading. The unauthorized contacts were one level down, according to his readout. Who were they? He wondered. You got rogue servitors occasionally, units whose cognitive functioning had degraded and left them roaming feral. They could be dangerous, but you never saw more than one or two at a time. Magma laborers, perhaps, attempting to up their quotas by slipping into forbidden zones to toil outside of their rotation. Drebs felt an unkind smile spread across his features at the thought. He moved his free hand to his belt, making sure that his shock truncheon and autopistol were both holstered where they should be. If the disturbance was due to unauthorized laborers, he thought, they were going to have a lot more to worry about than lagging quotas soon enough. Muttering a quick prayer to the spirits of his auspex, and his gun, and his truncheon, Drebs punched an access code into the nearby shaft hatch. The metal barrier slid up to reveal a ladder set into a claustrophobic metal shaft. The rungs climbed out of sight to higher levels, and also plunged away to the fiery depths below. Drebs hooked his auspex to his belt, gripped the rungs, and began to climb down. He felt the heat of the metal even through his thick gauntlets. He offered up a prayer of thanks to the Omnisire for the blessed thermal raiments he had been furnished with, and a glance at the heat cuff warning him the air outside his suit was hot enough to sear flesh. Thanks to the rumbling of the volcano and the hissing shudder of the pipes, coupled with the increasingly agitated beeps of Drebs' auspex, he didn't hear the chanting until he was almost at the next shaft hatch. He paused. He frowned. He knew the Binharik cant of the Magi and the prayer dirges of the labour gangs, and this did not sound like either. It was jagged, impassioned, the sound of hoarse and fervent voices spitting words that crackled like dancing flame. It brought to mind the fanciful tales of fire-dancing beings that his more superstitious comrades liked to bandy about. Dreb's heart beat faster. What was this? He wondered with a fresh surge of anger. Some form of heresy. If so, we know how to deal with this, don't we? He muttered, thinking of the auto-pistol at his belt with some relish. Can't take any chances. There's a war on, after all. Meaning to surprise whoever was doing the chanting, Drebs took one hand from the rungs of the ladder and popped open his holster and thumbed his pistol's arming rune. He took a deep breath. He tensed and then hit the hatch release and turned as quickly as he could in his bulky garb to lunge out of the hatch. A length of pipe hit the overseer square in the face. His goggles crazed as their plexiglass shattered and pain exploded through his skull. He tasted blood, and something else hit him hard in the back. The ground, he thought groggily. He had fallen. Drebs tasted blood. He coughed inside his hood and splattered red matter across his crazed lenses. Panic surged through him as he felt hands grasp him roughly and haul him to his feet. The next instant, his panic redoubled as someone tore the cowl from his head. The pain was instant and excruciating. The heat seared his skin, turned his breath to hot ashes in his throat and made his eyes water. Wah, he coughed. Through tear-blurred vision, Drebs took in the figures that clustered around him. They were magma labourers, as he had thought, but Overseer Drebs hadn't expected anything like this. The lunatics had stripped to the waist, and their hides were blistered red raw from the heat, yet they didn't seem to notice. Some had weird and unsettling devices tattooed into their flesh, others wore metallic avian masks that looked crudely forged, perhaps from stolen ore scraps and metallic waste. One, larger than the rest, prodded Drebs in the chest. Drebs dragged in a burning breath, and his eyes widened as he realized the brute's skin showed the scaly stigmata of mutation.
"Know you were coming, Overseer,"
sneered the big man from behind his strange bird mask. His voice was muffled and tinny.
"The flames showed us. You shouldn't have come down here."
A sense of unreality had stolen Dreb's strength, but now, as the mob of labourers dragged him unceremoniously down another corridor, he tried desperately to muster some authority. "Unhand me at once," he said. "I am your superior. You'll all be flogged for this. You'll have your quotas annulled." He had meant his threats to sound menacing, full of the anger he had come storming in with. Instead, Drebs realized he just sounded scared. His captor's cruel laughter told him that they heard it too.
"Nothing's gonna happen to us,
said the big man from right behind Drebs's left ear. His breath was wet and sour-smelling.
"Because no one is ever gonna know you was here."
The reality of the situation finally crashed home at that, and Drebs fought madly. He pulled one arm from the grip of the man on his right, surprising the tattooed heretic. He flailed that arm, landing a glancing blow on one of his captors, and then fumbling madly at his belt for his shock truncheon. If he could unhook it, and if he could thumb its activation rune, he might... The pipe hit him in the small of the back this time, and with unnatural force. Even through vulcanized robes and flak-weave armour, the blow was agony. Drebs screamed. He would have fallen had not his captors snatched him with fresh ferocity and dragged him onwards. Tingling jolts shot along Dreb's limbs from where the pipe had struck. His truncheon was ripped from his belt and flung away. Through a haze of pain, Drebs realized that a fiery glow was growing around him, and that the blistering heat was growing more intense by the moment. Holy terror suffused him at the thought that they were bearing him into the forbidden and most sacred heart of the reactor. He felt as though the fluid was boiling off his eyeballs. Drebs tried to take shallow breaths, and to avoid picturing his skin curling like burning parchment. "Are you mad?" he croaked. "We have to get out of here. The wrath of the Holy Machine. The heat." The heretics just laughed.
"We don't fear the Holy Machine,"
sneered the big brute, now striding ahead to the edge of an observation gantry. He stood among a swimming haze, his skin visibly scalding and blistering in the furious heat, and gestured over the edge.
We have other gods now, more powerful than that cold and distant thing on Mars.
Dreb's heart thundered as they dragged him to the edge.
Please,
he gasped.
Please, I...
The vast chamber rang with the dragon's breath, whoosh of steam venting, the whine and clangor of machinery, and below it all the menacing rumble of the lava channel flowing through the iron-clad depths. Drebs whimpered in agony as the heretics pushed him to the very edge, so he was looking down at the 100-foot drop into a river of molten rock and dancing flames.
"See them, offering,"
hissed a man at his left shoulder, and Drebs shuddered at the fanaticism in his voice. The man grabbed his head and pushed it down so that the overseer could not help but stare into the flames far below. He screwed his eyes up against the glare and the pain, and then frowned. Drebs stared, blinking away boiling tears. There was something down there, something in the flames. Figures, he thought, dancing, cavorting, glowing figures, but how could that be? He felt an unholy curiosity consume him, despite his awful situation, a need to know that seemed to come from somewhere outside his mind entirely. The heretics were chanting now, but as Drebs locked eyes with the glowing beings far below, the words seemed to fade into the distance, to become irrelevant in the face of some greater revelation yet to be had. If he'd looked a little longer, Drebs was sure he would have been able to make out precisely what he had been missing all this time. The thing below him leered hungrily. The blow between the shoulder blades came so suddenly that Drebs was over the edge before he had even realized. By the time his body burst into flame and hit the lava at the base of the shaft, he was already dead.